Blog Talk Radio.
What we see and what we think we know and believe. There are worlds. There are things that we cannot understand. Bigfoot's Pad Paranormal Investigations team is in charge of the field. Bigfoot's Pad Paranormal Investigations team.
Hello, and welcome tonight, everybody, to another night of Bigfoot's Pad Paranormal Radio. Tonight, we will be doing an interview with Jeff Hilling, a Patterson film researcher and historian, whose website, pattersonfilm.com, has a great deal of information on the subject. And has he called in yet?
Yeah, he's on the line right now. Jeff?
Oh, okay.
I'm here.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. How you doing, folks?
Pretty good. How are you doing? On the phone, there's me, Jeremy, and then there's my two co-hosts, Nick, who was the one who was just talking a little bit before I was, and then my other team member, Tim. So there's Tim, Nick, and Jeremy on the phone.
Well, this should be real easy to keep track of. It'd be like an audio shell game pretty much for me.
Yeah. Well, to start off the show, I'd like to have you explain a little bit about yourself and your background and what got you interested in the Patterson film.
Sure, absolutely. Pretty much when I was younger, I had always had a fascination since the old In Search of series came on and featured the Patterson film. And it since then has captivated me, and I've done a lot of research. I've read pretty much everything ever written about it, whether it was an article, whether it was watching a documentary, or whether it was reading somebody's book. And I developed a website about a year and a half ago, pattersonfilm.com, and it deals exclusively with the subject of the Patterson film. It's the only website out there that does. And I'm about to add more content to it and double up the size of it, actually. So it should be really good here. And I'm also about ready to release my book, and this is the first place I've ever gotten a chance to announce it. I just put an ad on my website for it, and the book should be out within the next month or so.
Sorry to backtrack real quick, but just in case anybody listening doesn't know, can you tell a little bit about like what the Patterson film is for people that don't know?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody has ever seen a picture of Bigfoot or the film clip of Bigfoot. Chances are they're thinking of the Patterson film. It's somewhat grainy old piece of 16mm film footage of the unknown creature roaming through the woods in Northern California. It's about a minute long, and it's pretty much everywhere. It's you Google an image of Bigfoot, that's the one that's going to come up from that film. And it was taken by a gentleman by the name of Roger Patterson back in 1967, and his sidekick, Bob Gimlin. And they were, Roger Patterson was a Bigfoot researcher. He was a Bigfoot enthusiast before there really was too much information to go on Bigfoot as far as the evidence went. A lot of it back then was pretty much tracks and hearsay and stories. And he wrote a book in 1966 called Do Abominable Snowmen of America Really Exist? And in 1967, October, he captured the image, what we know today as the Patterson film.
Well, now we backtracked a little bit. So is your book just like an analysis, or can you give like a quick synopsis, or just a little bit about your book?
Sure, I'll give you a little insight. It's basically recounting the events of the Patterson film, so it is historical, and it talks about every aspect of it. So there's a lot of my own opinion in there, but it's all based on the evidence. And I'm not trying to sway anybody either way in the book so much as I am just going through the evidence with the people who are reading. I'm showing you the possibilities. Could it be this? Could it be that? And by the end of the book, you will have your mind made up on what exactly happened that day, on October 20th, 1967. So it's a little mix of everything. It's all exclusively about the Patterson film, but it's not a heavy, technical, fact-filled, some of the books and articles about the Patterson film deal with a lot of technical diagrams and measurements and things like that that's been done. So I wanted to do something a little different. I wanted to talk about all the stories, all the reasonings away and for and against the Patterson film. I talk about why people believe it's genuine, why we should believe it's genuine. I talk about the possible nature that it isn't. What are the fishy circumstances surrounding it? I talk about how easy is it to make a creature of this likelihood. I mean, I talk about a lot of different things that some people have brought up and some I've never heard discussed before in this book.
Well, I mean, that's good, because both points of view do need to be described, and a lot of people do have it only one-sided in their books.
Yeah, most book I've ever read is either Bigfoot's real or Bigfoot's fake. Period. I'm dealing with the subject that we see in the Patterson film exclusively. So I'm not even going so much into the broader general term of cryptids and Bigfoot sightings here and there. This is strictly dealing with the beast in the Patterson film. And it does give leeway that this could be a hoax. But it also talks about if it was, what that would have needed to be done in order to accomplish this hoax. Mm-hmm. And I even give people advice on how, if they want to do their own creation of this film, how they can do it and how it needs to be done and all the things they have to think about.
That does sound pretty unique, though. What's the name of your book again? I'm sorry. I'll have to go get it.
I didn't even announce it here. It's called The Great Patterson Film Mystery, What Really Happened on October 20th, 1967. And that will be out probably within, I'm hoping within the next month to month and a half, it'll actually be printed off and ready to go. So
will we be able to pick it up on your website or at a book?
Yeah, it'll be an exclusive. I'm thinking about dealing with it exclusively on my website for various reasons. I like the nature of an underground book. I like the nature of not having to publishing companies and want a lot of times they want you to say things that you don't necessarily believe. And if you notice a lot of the mainstream Bigfoot books out there, they take a very similar angle in their approaches in pretty much every one you read. They're either saying it's real or it's fake. This is something I decided to do, and I offer some extraordinary extra theories in this book. So it'll be interesting. I'm really excited to see what people think of it.
So, I was saying, in your book, so you remain somewhat, I guess you could say, agnostic as to what the nature of the film is, sir?
Well, I do show what I believe. Now, my position on Bigfoot in this film is I am about 80% convinced that this is a real creature we're dealing with.
Oh, okay.
But I do leave about 20% that I'm uncertain, because we weren't there. And what we're dealing with is evidence based upon a film, strictly. We're not dealing with something that we have all the facts and all the evidence and everything we could possibly know about it. We have stories, accounts, eyewitnesses' testimony that we're dealing with, and then we're dealing with film as well that we can all visually look at and come to our own conclusions. So that being said, I don't think it's fair for me to say, I'm absolutely certain that this could be a beast. Or
yes.
But for the most part, it could have been a fake. But there's so many bizarre aspects to this film that if it were that a lot of times people are not addressed to people saying that this film is hoax.
Exactly, yeah, because I know our team's been researching the film for a little while, because we tend to do cryptids and Bigfoot hunts every so often. We go into expeditions trying to look for them, and our team is pretty, like you said, we're pretty convinced it's real, but then again, we also leave the possibility open for a hoax, though.
Yeah, and it definitely could be a hoax, but if it was a hoax, this is
a pretty good one.
Exactly.
The best one I've ever seen in my life. It's the most amazing magic illusion that was ever created. And the reason I say that is because if you go see a magician on stage, you know what you're dealing with is an illusion. You're dealing with an illusionist. And so anything you see, you are with full expectation that what you're seeing is not real. Now, what we're seeing with the Patterson film, assuming it's fake, is something that has blown the minds of people for decades. And another aspect about the film is the more you analyze it, and the more it has been analyzed by many people in different fields, anthropologists, people who are experts in gait and motion, film experts, people who have done computer simulations and recreations of this. A lot of times they'll say it's inconclusive, and many times they will say that what they have found is this is an actual beast of some sort. So if it were a fake, this is the best fake that was ever known to man.
Well, speaking of hoaxes, I'm going to go off and ask you a couple of questions about the hoaxes and things like that from your website.
Sure.
My first one I was going to ask you is about Bob Hieronymus. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Bob Hieronymus. He's a gentleman from Yakima, Washington, and it's an Indian name.
Let's say, could you explain a little bit about him and his hoax, like his claim to fame?
Sure, and I'm going to go into that a lot in my book as well. There's a pretty good part of it is devoted to that subject. So it is one of the more later parts of the story of the Patterson film. For quite a number of years, everything was pretty quiet until late 90s. Basically, he came out of the proverbial Bigfoot closet. And what happened is he claimed he was the man in the suit back in 1967. And this was very interesting, very intriguing. And I read the accounts that he had presented in newspapers, articles. Greg Long put out a book as well dealing with the whole Bob Hieronymus story, how it was done, what he had done. And there was also some news appearances, television appearances that I had seen him tell his story as well on. And the thing is, his story has been all over the board as far as who made the suit, where the suit came from, what the suit was made out of. These are things that have not been consistent that I have found in my research of his tale. So if he was telling us the truth that he was the man in the suit, well, he hasn't done a very good job in convincing me that he is telling the truth. Because when you start telling things that are completely diametrically opposed to the last thing you just said in the last interview, you got to think there's some kind of credibility there.
Yeah.
If he can't remember his facts, I don't know which one it is. So I am not convinced he's telling the truth. And he certainly hasn't shed any light on a lot of what we see as far as the aspects of the creature in the film, such as the muscle movements, the fact that the arm's length on this creature is abnormally long, but not just from, a glove level, like if you were to wear extension gloves, if you're wearing a Halloween costume, extend your arms longer on a creature, you would wear some sort of elongated gloves. Well, the length on the arm of the creature that we see is very peculiar because the brunt of the length comes from the shoulder all the way down to the elbow. So basically the humerus bone is what we're dealing with in the length, which is impossible for a person to face.
Mm-hmm. And so would you say that, so Bob, I was reading online that he doesn't even know how to get to the film site when people ask him?
That he doesn't know how to what?
How to get to the site where they filmed the footage?
Yes. Yeah, I've
read
that
he gave 3 different stories on contradicting stories about the suit and all that, like you were saying?
Yes. Yeah,
so,
and I don't Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, how many people claim to have been people in suits for the film?
There have been several throughout the past 4 decades. He's been the most major and most vocal one who's wound up in a lot of articles and interviews and books. So he's the most prominent and outspoken one. And but he's not been the first. So that is something, that I say that is just not very credible. His story has not been very credible in that way. Now, as far as him remembering where the site was or wasn't, it is not necessarily, I don't necessarily fault him for that so much because, it's 40 years ago. A lot of times if somebody asks you where you were a few years ago, where the exact site of anything was, you probably would remember, or you would have a rough estimate, yes, if you're talking about a very specific area. So that, I don't necessarily find that too much of a smoking gun against him. I'll give him a free pass on that. But that being said, the accounts of what the suit was made of, who, what kind of suit it was, were ordered from Roger Patterson make it. I mean, a lot of those stories that he has given have been so contradictory that it's very tough to believe anything else he says after that.
One thing I did have to admit, though, is he did do the walk kind of good, though. I mean, it's not exactly, but he did do the pretty good walk on the, better than the other people, I guess you could say, when they were tried to make him, do the gate, the special walk or whatever.
Yes. No, he
has
pretty
good, though, but
he has done
I personally
Bigfoot.
think that it was a real creature myself, but
yeah, I agree. He did a decent walk when they showed him walking around, and it, a lot of people have seen the film so many times that they can kind of mimic it to a certain extent. I think the whole thing of Hieronymus fell apart when they got the guy who claimed to be the suit maker involved with this. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I was just going to ask about Philip Morris and John Chambers, actually.
Yeah, no, let's go to Philip Morris. Because he's the one who directly ties in with the Bob Hieronymus aspect here. Now, right around the time when Greg Long was writing his book, he also got in contact with Philip Morris, who was making claims that he had made this costume for the Bigfoot film back in 1967. So what they did after that was they got together a film crew sponsored by National Geographic and TV Land. They made a little documentary, and Philip Morris drug out a costume, a Bigfoot-type costume, which is not available anywhere that I can find in his costume site. Pretty much he just deals with gorilla suits, but he comes up with this custom Bigfoot costume, and it looks pretty good. Doesn't look like the creature we see in the film, but it looks pretty good off of somebody when he was just holding it out there and presenting. And you have Bob Hieronymus, the guy who claimed to be the man in the suit. Well, what happened was they Bob Hieronymus back in the suit, allegedly. And they put it in there with the guy who claimed to be the designer and the maker of this Bigfoot suit back in '67. Well, you think with the original guy and the original suit maker, you know, you basically have the original ingredients for the original recipe of this film. Well, they should be able to recreate something that looks pretty darn close to what we saw back then. And, you know, Bob Hieronymus, you had talked about how he did this walk, and he did it fairly good. Well, when he got in the suit, it was very laughable, if you ask me. It was a very almost funny attempt at what we see in the Patterson film. So we have something basically that should have looked 100% or 90%, maybe even 80%, giving them some leeway with time and the fact that they didn't do it exactly right and they're not in the same spot and didn't use the same type of camera or whatnot, but it should look close. It looked nothing like it. It looked like a high school mascot. It was silly. I mean, you should have something pretty close, but it was ridiculous. It was one of the worst attempts I've ever seen. So it's not just getting somebody, throwing them in a suit, and telling them to walk like Bigfoot that makes a believable creature, as we found out. If anything, that whole experiment strengthened the case of the Patterson film in my book, because that told me that...
we have a caller on the line in 256. You're on the air.
Hello, caller.
Who, me? Hello?
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 Hi, how are you?
You're on the air.
I was just listening in because I can't hear you on the internet, so I tuned in. So I'm just going to hang out here and listen. I'm very interested.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. I'll keep you connected. You can make a comment or whatever you want if you feel like it, or if you want to make one while we're talking about whatever.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. So anyways, Jeff, while we're talking about the costume, where does Philip say the costume is now? Like, what do you say ended up happening to that?
Well, nobody knows where the costume is. Philip Morris doesn't claim to know what it's happened. He claimed he sold it to Roger Patterson, so it was Patterson's property, basically. Now, Bob Hieronymus did make a claim that the last time he saw the suit was in his mother's car. Apparently, a road trip down to California, I guess, in his mother's car, according to his side of the story. And he got shoved the monkey suit in the back of his mother's trunk. And there's a little story I go into in the book about that incident. And it freaked his mother out when she opened the trunk, put some fruit in there. And he claims that was the last time he saw it, but he doesn't know what happened to it from there on out, which is very suspect to me. For one, the suit, the claim that was made of the suit price back then was, $700 or $800. That's a lot of money back then.
Hey, Jeff? Jeff? Oh, your phone's getting all scrambly, like it's getting hard to understand you. I was going to say, we couldn't hear what you were saying, like the last, a minute or two.
You want me to call you back?
Now it sounds better.
Okay.
But yeah, what were you saying? You said something about there was a price tag?
Yeah, the price tag on the suit that he paid back in '67 was somewhere around $700 or $800, allegedly, according to the Philip Morris Company. Okay. That's a lot of money back then. So if you're going to perpetrate a hoax, you hire somebody to do the acting job in the suit. You let them just walk off with the costume, especially seeing this costume would be evidence, in a sense, if you're trying to fool people with the film you just made. You just let them get away with it and don't say anything about it or grab a hold of it at some point. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I agree, though. That's very ludicrous.
So that was John Chambers. does he claim to do the same thing? Like, does he claims he made a costume too, didn't he? Or did he claim he just part of Philip Morris and him teamed up or something?
Well, no, John Chambers, that's kind of a separate story. Now, he was a Hollywood movie maker, special effects artist. He was a professional. Now, Philip Morris makes the kind of suits you'd go out on Halloween in, basically. Really high-end, Halloween costume type, basically. Or it might be something you'd see in a B movie. You see somebody in a funny gorilla suit that you obviously know is fake back in the 60s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of caliber of suits you can buy from the Philip Morris company. They're standard consumer grade, pretty decent Hollywood or Halloween costumes. John Chambers was an effects artist. He did the gorilla for the apes for Planet of the Apes series. So back then he was completely the guy to go to for any special effects of that nature, that high-end level. He also did the apes at the beginning of the film 2001, Space Odyssey, from Stanley Kubrick's directing. He did that special effects work as well. And he's done other stuff on the Star Trek series. He's worked on a lot of shows. I think the Munsters he did work on. So he was on a lot of high-end projects. So to think that Roger Patterson, who is a rodeo guy, was getting involved somehow with a guy who's very busy, especially around that time, working on the Planet of the Apes movies, to make some sort of hoax film or lending him a costume or making him a custom costume is absolutely absurd. Just the whole idea of it. But the notion that he did it was also put to rest not too long ago. A lady by the name of Bobby Short had done an interview with Chambers before he died, and she asked him point blank if he had made the suit, and he claims he didn't. He said himself, I could never make a suit that good. I was good, but I wasn't that good, I believe was somewhere close to the original phrase. And he put that idea to rest. Really, that whole notion came from John Landis, filmmaker in Hollywood. Put that idea out there that John Chambers made them. Why he said it, I don't know. What really ran with that once that rumor started.
And again, that's coming from his own mouth and everything too, which lends a lot of credibility towards that. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. He flat out denied it. He had nothing to do with it. And if you can look at if this was a suit, this looks nothing like what we would see in a Halloween costume shop. This doesn't look anything like a gorilla suit. Your average gorilla suit that you can go and buy. I put some of those on my website, PattersonFilm.com. Just some typical gorilla suits that you can buy nowadays for Halloween. And these things aren't cheap. They're several $100s to several $1,000s. But they still don't look believable. I mean, if you saw somebody in one of these costumes, even the most expensive one, you wouldn't think it was a real gorilla. Even if the person inside of it was a professional actor who was trained to move like a gorilla. They wouldn't fool you. I mean, you couldn't bring people, put it in a cage and tell people you had a gorilla and people would actually believe you. Unless they were on drugs or, drunk or something. Or in a very dimly lit room. Or it would have to be something you were using for a carnival act or something. It's nothing like we see in this film that Roger Patterson caught on film. So whatever, if it was a suit, it was something very, very custom, and it was also something very, very ahead of its time. So far ahead of its time that we still can't replicate it to this day.
Yeah, Jeff, we have a question in one of our chat rooms. Somebody's asking, could you explain a little difference, the difference between the Planet of the Apes costumes and the costume that was, or if it was a costume, like the Patterson creature?
Well, the creatures we see in the Planet of the Apes, well, for one, they look very human-like. I mean, he put a lot of the work really into the head. John Chambers did. If you look at and they look ape-like in the face and in the mouth in particular, but the body themselves of the suit is hairy, but it doesn't look anything more than like a human as far as the body. And the creature we see in the Patterson film has very unusual elongated arms in the humerus section of the arm from the elbow to the shoulder, which is very odd. It shows
so in other words, the physiology of the costumes in the Planet of the Apes doesn't even come close to the creature in the Patterson film.
No, and I don't think it was. I don't know if he could have made it even close for one, but I don't think it was even. It wasn't supposed to be what we were seeing. You know, there was no need to put all kinds of muscles and things in there. Even if he could have done it, I don't think it really mattered for the film so much. The real special effect was done in the face and the makeup in the face and the characters more than so the body. Well, the Patterson film, we can see the face a little bit, but what we're really looking at, a lot of it, is really the body. We're looking at the muscles that we see in the legs, the arms, the back of the arms, the back itself. There's a lot of different muscle movements. We also see the breasts in the creature. This is something that was never done in a costume up until that point. I don't even know about after that point, as far as an ape-like man-beast type creature where we see believable-looking breast on it. It's very out there. And Hollywood didn't even do that back then. That was not anything that you could buy at a Halloween shop, or a Hollywood customized movie wasn't even using that yet.
Yeah, one thing I was going to point out, though, while you're talking about the breast, the BFRO's website, they said that you would think that if you're going to portray some kind of creature and try to hoax it, that you would have tried to portray a male and not a female, because it would have been easier. And especially in those times, like you were saying, you think that they wouldn't have put breasts on it.
Yeah, I agree with that point 100%. There's no need for it, really. Because if Roger Patterson left them off, who would have thought anything less of it? You wouldn't have thought it was, well, it doesn't have breasts, so therefore I'm not, it's less believable. It's not that easy. If you're going to make a custom costume, or if you're even going to alter an existing costume, which both claims have been made about the costume, you're going to put breasts on it. How are you going to go about this? You're a rodeo guy who is not, as far as I can do in any of my research, as far as anything I've found, he had no connection with being a special effects artist or a costume maker. So you're going to do this in your garage on the weekend. How are you going to do this? How are you going to make it believable? Why are you going to do it? It's not that easy.
Oh, exactly. And again, we all agree with you, and exactly. And in most cases too, everybody just says he simply had nothing to lose. You know what I mean? Why would he gamble everything in his life just for this film?
Well, that's true, and it's I encourage people to, if they really think this is easy, well, go out and make yourself a little film. See if you can pull it off. Whether you buy a costume or make one or whatever the case may be. This is something that is not very easily done. And when people just say it's a monkey suit, it's a guy in a monkey suit, they're really not thinking through all the aspects of what we're seeing in the film. I don't think they've thought very hard about the image and the motion of the creature itself. What are we dealing with? What are we seeing? And if we haven't been able to come close to replicating this in 4 decades with better technology, better materials, better knowledge of costume making and special effects artistry, that it doesn't make sense. I guess Roger Patterson was the best costume maker of all time, or the best special effects wizard that there ever was, if this was a suit.
Well, speaking of details, I also noticed that on some websites they talk about how the arms hang low like an ape, like in the wild, and you wouldn't think that the average person would know about all that type of thing when they're designing a suit like that either.
Yeah, I mean, he may or may not have known that it was a feature if he was going to build a suit, but it is one of many things that when you're looking at somebody who made an obviously fake Bigfoot costume, the arms usually look like human arms, or if they're longer, they will be longer at the glove level. You know, it looks obviously fake when the elbow to the tip of the finger is abnormally long, and then the point of the elbow to the top of the shoulder is normal length. It's obvious somebody's got some extended gloves on. And that's typically what you see with the long arms in the, even in Hollywood movies. I mean, you can't really do it any other way other than doing a complete computer animation. But if you have somebody you're dealing with in a costume, that's the only way you can really lengthen the arms that I know of, unless you're going to start breaking somebody's bones. I don't know of any other way.
Things I was going to bring up. In the film, the creature actually looked surprised when they come walking up on it, like it was doing something down in the creek, and they didn't even know that Roger and Bob were walking up on him.
Yeah, very good observation. He does look surprised. Now, recently, we've gotten a pretty good look at the beginning of the film, which was very shaky and originally because of obvious reasons. He's thrown back from the horse, and then he grabs the camera, and he's scrambling to get it going and get it stabilized. And that's why we see all that shake at the beginning. In particular, the recent technology is they have stabilized a lot of the footage, so we can see the creature at the beginning does look like he just wasn't aware of it, and then come around the corner, which makes sense to me. And people will often argue the fact that, well, if you look closely, some people will say that they see the Bigfoot creature starting from a standstill. Okay? And that proves that this was a hoax, because the person in the suit, as they say, was just standing there, and then they told him to go and then started filming. Now, I don't know about you, but creatures of all sorts start from standstill before they start walking. This is really not a very good piece of evidence to prove that it's somebody in a suit. I mean, if you go out there and film a deer, a lot of times they start at a standstill, and then once they see you, they start moving on. So that's really, really poor piece of evidence in favor of the suit when people use that argument. And it's really proof of neither one, what I'm saying. Because wild creatures, as far as I know, they all start from a standstill at some point. Everything sitting there at some point in time is not in constant motion. So it makes perfect sense to me that creature would be startled, would be standing there doing something, and then the camera starts rolling, and then they start moving.
Oh, another thing I was going to ask you also is, I've seen some websites that said that there's a hernia on one of the legs also that we didn't even know until recently.
Yeah, and they're talking about a particular, if you blow up some of the footage which has been done, you look at the leg movement, you will see a bulging in the, I believe it's in the thigh, the right thigh of the creature. We do see a sort of bulging image when you look through 2 or 3 different frames. It will show the hernia, the alleged hernia, I should say, bulging out when the creature's muscle starts flexing from its walking, is what we're seeing according to some. Now, this could be a film anomaly, but to me, it's very convincing when I look at that piece of film that you're talking about, the close-up of the hernia. And it could be a muscle or a hernia, or it's possibly it's just a piece of the fur, and it could be a film anomaly. I mean, I'm not putting it past that, but it is very intriguing and very interesting. I've never seen anything like that in any of the other attempts or recreations of a Bigfoot. When people try to purposely portray the Patterson film in a suit, or if they do it in a recreation, or if they do it even in Hollywood.
Hey, Jeff, your phone's starting to scramble a little bit again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now you're good.
Okay. So it is one of those things that is very you got to look at it both ways, but at the same time, I've never seen a Hollywood movie where you can find the things going on that we see in the Patterson film.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that I'm being asked right now is there is somebody asking about a deathbed confession of Roger Patterson.
Yes. Okay. I can handle that. I actually go into that in my book. That should be released soon. Once again, the title is The Great Patterson Film Mystery. You can get it on the website, pattersonfilm.com, once it's available. I go into that. I'll let you know what the whole deal is with that. What we're dealing with in the deathbed confession of Roger Patterson is not a deathbed confession at all. What we're dealing with is him affirming his belief in Bigfoot. There was no deathbed confession. A lot of times what people are mistaking when they hear that story about Roger Patterson telling people on his deathbed that it was a hoax is there was a man who did the film or the picture image of the Loch Ness Monster. Do you guys remember that image?
Oh, I sure do.
Yeah, and that was proven to be a hoax somewhat recently because the man who had taken the picture admitted on his deathbed that it was a hoax. And a lot of times people mix those two stories up because you're dealing with a cryptozoology issue. You're dealing with somebody who owns the image, and then you have them dying. So they mix it up with Roger Patterson and the Bigfoot film, basically. Roger Patterson never admitted that. Until his dying day, he held firm that it was a real creature. And here's a little-known fact I'm going to share with you about Roger Patterson that tells me that he genuinely believed in Bigfoot. Now, when I was doing my research, I came across some articles discussing that in his later years, he died in 1972. The film was made in late 67, so he didn't have a lot of time left after he made this film. He died of cancer. So he took some of the money he made, and actually a lot of the money that he had left over that he had made from the Patterson film, shopping it around the places and doing little showings here and there. It was fairly underground at the time, but he did make some money on it. But he took a lot of that money and he invested it into working on getting a hold of an actual creature that somebody claimed over in Taiwan that they had captured in a monastery. Now, this sounds kind of ridiculous, but somebody in Taiwan had written him a letter stating that they had a Bigfoot. And it turned out to be a hoax, okay? But Roger Patterson had spent a lot of time and money trying to obtain this creature. Now, that tells me that if he was hoaxing this whole thing, well, he still believed in Bigfoot, which doesn't seem likely if you're going to hoax something. I mean, if you don't believe in something, you usually will perpetrate a hoax under the guise that you don't believe in it. This tells me that he absolutely 100% put his money where his mouth is when it came to Bigfoot, his beliefs, because he wasted a lot of money.
Exactly. I mean, I never knew that, but that does lean a lot more towards credibility already.
Yeah, so that tells me he believed in Bigfoot. Now, that doesn't say it wasn't or couldn't have been a hoax, but he did have a belief in a Bigfoot creature.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, Nick, did you have any questions for Jeff?
I was just wondering, do you go in your book at all, Jeff, into attempts, debunkery attempts people have made to try to debunk the Patterson film?
I go into most, if not all, of the concepts of why or what people say about this film, okay? Whether they believe it or don't believe it. I do go into the debunking attempts as far as why people say it's fake. And I go into, well, let's look at this logically. Is what they're saying, does it hold water or does it not hold water? I let you, the reader, make up your mind based upon the facts that I'm laying out for you. And I think everybody who reads this book will come to a definite conclusion of what they believe. I think this will finally show people what the truth really is, and not by me telling you what the truth is, by you going through it yourself and checking out the facts and listening just to some of the arguments and thinking about them in a different light. This will help everybody who reads this book figure out this mystery for their own. Yes, I do go into quite a few different debunking. A lot of the book has to do with the debunking, what people say about it, what people say about Patterson's character, what people say about what the solution is for this film. It goes into every major thing I can find that's worth talking about Patterson.
Well, I mean, that's great, though, Jeff, because I love books that actually give a both-sided view. I don't like it necessarily. Most books you read that are really one-sided when it comes to that it's either fake or it's real.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I could sit there and tell you what I think all day long, but I do put my opinions forth in this book. There's plenty of my opinions, but they're based on reasonable facts of the whole thing. It's not just something that I'm just making up and telling you what to believe. I'm trying to give everybody the benefit of the doubt in this. I'm trying to look at it that, yes, this could be a man in a suit. And I'm also trying to look at the fact that this could be a genuine unknown creature. I mean, how would we know what a Bigfoot is unless we knew what a Bigfoot was? You know what I'm saying? We have nothing to compare Bigfoot to. There's nothing to... I mean,
the question that I was personally wondering about was, I know when they went to the location, they they actually took plaster casts of some of the footprints.
Yes.
Do you know how many of those they took, or did they only use one, or?
They took a couple that day, and then what happened was the next day, a couple guys came in. I have it in my book. I'm trying to remember their names off the top of my head. And they took their own cast, separate people. And then about 9 days later, somebody else came to the site, and they did their own research of the tracks and the placement of the tracks, and a lot of other things as well, too. A little more analysis for the Patterson film. So we have the original people who filmed it, so it would be Patterson and Gimlin taking tracks, and then we have somebody coming in the next day taking more tracks themselves, somebody completely independent of the two. And then about 9 days later, somebody came and looked at the tracks, I guess they were still there, and checked out the site and did a bunch of analysis of what they saw. So we do have different independent verifications of the tracks that were laid out. And that's another thing about this film. We don't just have a film, we have corresponding tracks that, for all reasonable research, seem to match up just fine with what we see going on in the film.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, again, in most hoaxes and everything, you only have one or the other again, too.
Well, I was gonna add in something really quickly. The great Stanton Friedman once said on our show, debunkers have nothing to prove because they already have the answers.
Who said that? Stanton Friedman?
Stanton Friedman, the UFO researcher. The great Roswell expert. Great Roswell expert.
That's a very good thing. You know, be skeptical about things, anything we do. But to be skeptical for skeptical sake is never any good. That just means you're out, you've got an axe to grind, you've got a bend.
Your phone's scrambled a little bit, Jeff.
Okay, and you're trying to prove something wrong just because it's wrong. That's not the way you go about doing research. That's not the way you get to the bottom of the truth. That's the way you slant a story to your favor, but it never proves anything.
Well, I know that the Patterson footage, like somebody was just asking, the creature is actually relevant, and it's relevant to the sightings and the stories over the past couple of 100 years of what Sasquatch would look like, and the reports still similar to that creature. So, do you think that the film holds up to time, modern times, of what the are being?
I'm sorry, it's a little. I'm hearing a little scrambling in your end. What was the question?
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, because I think your phone and another guy's was scrambling. I'd say somebody was asking, do you think that the film holds up to modern times as far as not being able to be debunked and as far as how good the footage is and all that?
Well, the film is what it is. It is something we have not been able to explain to this day. So in that regard, I say it has held the test of time, absolutely. Nobody has ever disproved this thing to be other than what it is. It's not saying it could have been fake, but at the same time, this is something to this day nobody's come up with a reasonable answer for. Nobody's ever been able to solve this mystery of this equation yet. Which lends more credibility that it was actually a creature. People say it looks like a man in a suit sometimes. People say it looks like a man in a furry suit. Well, isn't that pretty much what Bigfoot is supposed to look like? I mean, what is it supposed to look like? If you saw a real Bigfoot, would you say it looks like a man in a furry suit? I mean, that's what I was saying. We don't even know what to compare a Bigfoot to because we don't have one that's captive that we can point at and say, that's a Bigfoot. This is not. This is a man in the suit. But either way, Bigfoot by legend and folklore and by every account I've ever read, it looks like a hairy man. So it stands to reason it would look like a man in a suit. But a man in a suit has not been able to fool people. When people come up with little pranks of hairy beasts in suits or replicas of the Patterson film, they don't fool anybody. Nobody sits and wonders what it is. Why is that? Because it's not believable. But the Patterson film itself has fooled a lot of people if it is a hoax, and will probably forever, because we can't replicate.
Another interesting fact is Bob Gimlin. To this day, he's never recanted anything about the Patterson footage. He stood very firm and strong, and what was videotaped that day, and what he claims was videotaped.
Yeah, absolutely. He is still adamant that what he saw was real, that it was not a hoax. Now, he has left a little door open, saying that it is possible that this could have been a hoax without his knowledge. In other words, maybe Patterson had worked something out with somebody else to get in a suit and pull one over on Bob Gimlin. Well, I don't think that story it doesn't hold up in my mind in analysis, because you've got a guy there basically with a rifle, a 30-06 rifle, ready at any moment to take a shot at this creature. That's not a good idea if you're pulling a hoax over. You don't want to pull the hoax over on the guy with a loaded gun, okay? Because he could just decide 1 second, you know what, I'm going to take a shot and take care of this beast. I'm going to shoot it right now. They had made a pact, allegedly, before that they would not shoot it unless they were in danger. But who knows? I mean, you might change your mind at the last second. That's no way to put somebody in the man in the suit in harm's way. I mean, that you might have might be looking at manslaughter there and some prison time. So that is that theory doesn't hold up to me. So I think he is a genuine person. He has said to this day that he believes it was not a hoax, and he still shows up once in a while at these little Bigfoot gatherings and roundups, and they have a little roundup every year in Yakima in his honor, and he still insists that the story is legitimate and what we see in the film is legitimate.
Oh. Brent? Oh, yeah, one of my co-hosts I thought had a question. But yeah, I was just wondering, I read also online that somebody said there was like a zipper that they could see on the suit. I was just thinking, do you think that it's matrixing? Like blowing up the image too large or something? Or
that's possible. Now, some people say that they could see a zipper line on the back. Well, to me, that's kind of where the spine goes, you know? You see hair with a part in it down the back. That's fairly typical. If you look at apes, too, you can kind of see that line, too. But, yeah, you could be right about, you start blowing up images too far, you start seeing all kinds of crazy stuff. We cannot just take this as a single image. We need to take this also as a film. A lot of these anomalies that people point out in the film, if they're trying to debunk it, they're usually done with a single frame of film. The anomalies that they point out usually disappear once you play the picture in motion itself. A lot of times people see a speck on the film. You know, I think a lot of people who are particularly young in general who are looking at this film don't know exactly how to look at some of these films they're seeing. Okay, these are 16 millimeter Kodak films. These are films. These aren't digital. These aren't VHS. These are old analog things. So they're a peculiar creature in and of themselves. They do produce anomalies. If you blow them up 400 times larger than they actually are, you're going to see some strange things. And we can't go upon every little strange thing we see when we blow it up. So that's a very good observation.
Oh, definitely. Well, something that I was personally curious about is who actually owns the rights to the film nowadays?
Well, what happened with the rights, and I go into this in my book, is there was some dispute over the rights with Bob Gimlin and also Patricia Patterson, and then there was a man named Rene Dondren, and he owned 51%, and Mrs. Patterson owned the other percentage of the rights. Now, he has passed away, this Rene Dondren character, and Mrs. Patterson is still alive, and she still owns at least a portion of the rights to the film. I think his family owns the other part, and he was just a person that had done a lot of Bigfoot research, and Patterson had sold him some of the rights to. So there was, I think it's still in his family, but Mrs. Patterson does own the rights to a certain degree, a certain percentage of the rights of the film.
So has anybody made any money off the film?
Roger Patterson did make some money off the film. In his early stages, this film was not like we see it where it's everywhere all the time now. You turn it on Discovery Channel, National Geographic Channel, you turn it on all kinds of specials nowadays. You see the Patterson film everywhere. Well, in Patterson, after he made the film, there wasn't much interest in it from scientists. Nobody really took it seriously. We couldn't analyze it very well back then either, in that day and age, not like we can today, and have been able to throughout the decades. So what he did was, 1968, 69, he started shopping it around to different places. He started taking it on a little film tour, if you will. He set up stuff in little auditoriums, high school gyms, movie theaters, whoever would play the film for him. He would set it up for a weekend showing or a 7-day events where he would charge admission and do a little presentation about the film. So he did make some money, and then he made it onto a few TV shows. And but the film itself and its popularity really did not take off until after his death. He never really
Your phone's messing up a little bit there, Jeff.
Okay, I'm doing the best I can here. The popularity of the film really didn't take off till after his death. It was something that he never saw the peak of the pinnacle of the interest of his film. It really came about in the 70s after the show In Search Of. That show aired on there, and then it was everywhere. Bigfoot was everywhere, and you couldn't stop it. There was people interested in it all over the place. That was really what launched this film, and that was after his death. So there was some money made, and I don't know about it as far as after his death, how much people own the rights to Mrs. Patterson and this Andrew guy, how much they made. But they'll never get some money. How much, I don't know. I'm not certain that I'm not going to get that figure. But it has produced some money. But like I said, a lot of that money that he made, he put into trying to, he had to scam books from whoever in Taiwan, basically.
Do you have any questions, Nick?
No, not at this minute, no.
Oh, so Jeff, we have a question actually in our chat room. They're asking, so do you look into other cases, or do you mainly just look at the Patterson film?
Well, if somebody writes me through my website, pattersonfilm.com, I'll listen to what they got to say and give them my opinion. Absolutely. But as of right now, I've dedicated everything I've got to the Patterson film, the website, this up-and-coming book that should be available soon through my website, and it will. It's all about the Patterson film. Every detail about it that's important, and so as of right now, just the Patterson film, because I could go off on 90 different directions, but I've never seen anybody devote everything to the most important aspect of Bigfoot as we know it, which is the Patterson film. There is no second place in the Bigfoot world, really, as far as evidence goes.
Exactly, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Roswell UFO incident really launched the whole UFO realm. Well, that's what happened with the Patterson film. The Patterson film's like the Roswell incident of 1947, pretty much.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
But no, we'd definitely really be interested in when your book comes out. Definitely let us know. We'll email you with our email, and we'll definitely be interested. We'll be probably one of the first ones to want to have the book.
Oh, absolutely. I will let you folks know as soon as it's out, and it will be available through the website exclusively, and you'll be the first to know. It's going to be some interesting
all
stuff.
Of us will probably have copies.
That would be great. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a true underground book. It's going to be something that it's not people telling me what to say. It's not people your typical Bigfoot book. They all kind of say the same things because they're all run through publishing houses that want certain things said. And there's certain aspects of this film that people don't want to get out, and things that people don't want to discuss. And I'm going to talk about them in this book.
Well, Jeff, also, I don't know if you've heard, but they said on the BFRO website, they were saying that the Wikipedia.com had something saying that the Patterson film and Sasquatch is fake and that there's no possibility that it could be real. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I'll tell you what my opinion is on that. Let's go back a little bit, maybe 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago. There was a creature out there in the woods that people were terrified of, and pretty much they thought it was just folklore, old wives' tales, people hallucinating, discrediting their stories because the person's a drunk and whatnot. And turns out this mythical beast finally was captured. And that beast that I'm talking about is a gorilla. Now, this was a little over 100 years ago. And there have been a lot of creatures since then that I'm actually going to list them in my book that have been discovered that were, before they were captured, dead or alive, didn't exist. So when people say something cannot exist, that's foolishness. Because these other animals, before somebody actually produced them, didn't exist either. So that's when people say something like this cannot exist, well, the person would have to have the omniscience of God to know all things of what exists and what doesn't exist.
Exactly, and there's so many different terrains, locations, and isolated areas throughout the world, too. There's definitely enough room for an unexplored ape to definitely live.
Oh, yeah.
Well, absolutely. We don't know. Another thing I bring up, too, is we don't know how many of these creatures are. You know, is it possible that Roger Patterson filmed one of the last remaining Bigfoots? That's something I'm going to get into in the book as well. This is a possibility, but people never seem to bring it up. It is possible that he possibly caught one of the last ones on film. Or they're not as prolific as people make them out to be. There could be less than a dozen that exist. And that's very easy to hide if you're only a dozen or two of a certain creature.
Oh, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And another question we were getting, have you ever happened to have a personal Bigfoot sighting? I'm sorry. It's quite a popular question we keep getting in.
No, actually I have not. I'm out in the woods myself. I live in a very remote wooded area, so I have the ability to walk around and just look around and listen, and I have not. No, I'm not going to sit here and give you some wild testimony of that I saw Bigfoot and I deal with him every other day, and I haven't. I'm just a researcher. I'm a historian of sorts. Now, I do listen to people who have told me they have. I heard somebody locally, when I was at the bank, they were telling me a recent sighting that was in my town about a year ago when I was at the bank. The lady knows what I do, and she explained that there was a Bigfoot sighting. And it wasn't anything that was put out in the paper or anything. It was just local talk, really. And I tended to believe the people that they believe what they saw. So it's not that I discount people's who believe in Bigfoot. I believe in Bigfoot. It's just I've not had a personal encounter with one, and I'm not going to pretend like I have either. Some people do that to sell books. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be as honest and truthful as I can. And if I ever do, boy, you'll be the first to know.
Thank you. It's quite a popular question we've been getting since the show began. We're trying to let you explain a little bit about your book before you jump straight into that topic, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jeff.
Go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, Jeff, do you know about the Michael Green footage, the squeaky footage it's known on the internet of it's infrared footage of a possible creature?
Okay. Is it a white-looking Bigfoot that was filmed on videotape years ago? Pretty recent. I think it was like 2008 or 2009. He videotaped it down in West Virginia. I think I have seen
it. Yeah, he's another guest we had on our show, and I was just curious to see if you knew about his footage.
Yeah, I've seen pretty much most of the other footages out there. Now, some of them I'm very curious about, but none of them am I nearly as impressed with as the Patterson film.
Oh, no.
part of it is the fact of the format that people are filming these things in nowadays. This is another topic I get into my book here, is that people nowadays are using digital phones. They're using the camera feature, the film feature on their camera. They're using digital tape recorders that are less than spectacular, okay?
Yeah.
That's what the consumer has to deal with and is using nowadays. Now, in Patterson's day, even though we've come 40 years into the future plus, in a sense, we've kind of gone backwards as far as the technology. He was using some very, very incredible equipment. 16 millimeter film is very good. For analyzation, it's incredible. Now, when you look at digital things or VHS film that we've seen in the past 15 years, a lot of that stuff is pretty much, you can look at it for whatever they got on there, but as far as further analysis, it doesn't go any further, or not very much further. There's not much that can be done with it. So in that regard, we're kind of at a standstill until maybe technology even gets a little better. When people are capturing these things on film, we can't really do much with it. You look at it and you go, wow, that's interesting, but you blow it up and it's all of a sudden incredibly pixelated, or it's even blurrier, and you can't do much with it. Now, the Patterson film is just incredible. That thing has been blown up beyond what any other footage is capable of being. So we have gotten so much out of that footage compared to with nowadays. That's why when you hear about Bigfoot sightings and people catching them on film, there's not that much interest in them nowadays, because they're not filmed in the right format, unfortunately. So people who are analyzing things, it just kind of gets pushed aside, really.
Yeah, Jeff, have you ever gone on a Bigfoot expedition yourself, personally?
Well, I go out there just about every day myself when I go for my hike. I keep my eyes open. No, I have not actually gone on something that was officially called the Bigfoot expedition. I do talk about it quite a bit in my book, though, that's coming out. I say a couple things about them is sometimes that people are putting them out there. There are Bigfoot organizations out there that are selling people trips to go see Bigfoot, and I think they're nothing more than glorified snipe hunts.
I had a question. Have you ever been to the...
Go ahead.
Oh, can't hear you.
Whoops. Oh, yes, can't hear you, dear. Oh, I was saying, have you ever been to the Patterson film site, or have you ever met Bob or Roger?
No, I have not met either one of them. Now, I do have their contact information, and I've actually thought about contacting Bob and Roger before I do the final printing, because I thought about doing an interview with them, possibly putting in the book. The book is about 80-90% done, and it'll be done in the next 2 weeks. I'm just putting the finishing touches on it. Now, the reason I really haven't gone after them in particular as far as showcasing them in my book, which I still might, there's been so many interviews done with both these guys. There's so much information already been asked to them. I don't know if I could ask them anything new that hasn't already been asked to them. Now, if I have pressing questions, I'm certainly going to go. I'm going to give them a call, absolutely. And I'm trying to think very hardly about this, because they're both very old, and we don't know how much more time we have with them on this earth as far as getting them, any information from them. But there's already so much information about the Patterson film, so many questions that have been asked in my research. It's all been recorded. I've dug up a lot of stuff that both these gentlemen have said and been asked, and just about every question under the sun has been asked. So what I'm doing is put all these theories together and going by their own testimony as well as other people's questionable theories and, reasonable theories about the Bigfoot film.
Well, something interesting, I think it was either your website or the BFRO, you said that Bob Gimlin said that, he said even though he believes that the film is real, he said he always leaves an open window for a hoax beyond his knowledge.
Yeah, I put that on my website, Patterson-Gimlin.com, and that was mainly dealing with that whole issue that, he did say with an open mind that it's possible that it could have been a hoax without his knowledge, like I said earlier. It could have been Roger Patterson playing a joke on him, if you will. But then I went in to talk about that, well, you don't want to be playing a joke on somebody with a rifle and not let them in on the gag. So either, in my estimation, Bob Gimlin was in on it as a hoax, or it was a real deal.
Did you have any questions, Brent?
I didn't have any questions.
Well, did you have any comments or anything on the Patterson film, Brent? Or?
Not right now, I don't.
All right. So anyways, another thing, Jeff, I was going to ask you. It says that Bob Gimlin avoided TV crews and news media originally after filming it, the footage.
Yes.
Did he come forward during for an interview, or did he come forward for another reason, or what got him to come forward?
I'm not really sure. I think a lot of it, you can really thank a lot of the people with their interest in Bigfoot. I mean, he nowadays he's very open and very receptive to the people who are into Bigfoot, which I think is great. He shows up at some of these events, these Bigfoot events, these annual things they put on, and they celebrate the Patterson film, and they celebrate Bob Gimlin's contribution. Is what they do. So I think it's just he eventually just came around and realized that he's got quite a lot of people who are very interested in what he helped do. And this hasn't really been until the past decade. Up until then, he's been very quiet about it. You're right. So you could look at that as a couple different ways. You could look at that as being somewhat suspicious. Was Bob Gimlin being quiet because he didn't want to talk about a hoax, or was he being very humble and just didn't want to be involved with the limelight? That question remains to be seen. Now, he is a fairly quiet person. He's very humble by nature, so it does stand to reason that he could have just been not wanting publicity. Yeah. And over the years, his wife has gotten a lot of ribbing, and from his involvement in this throughout the years. But apparently nowadays he's good with it, and he seems to be a pretty decent person.
Well, I know, Nick, you and me were talking actually about the whole staying quiet about the Patterson film. What's your opinion on that, there, Nick?
Well, like you said, Gimlin's character is just one of a quiet, humble person, and he probably wouldn't want the spotlight. And also, you think about it in that time before the craze kicked off in the 70s. You have this piece of footage that's very, he probably knew it would be controversial, and there's a lot of ridicule and whatnot that has come along with that. So I think he just wanted to avoid that as well. Bad publicity, basically. What I'm saying is something he probably wanted to avoid. He didn't want to be ridiculed in the public eye. So maybe that's why he didn't come forward either. So.
Well, Jeff, we have a question in our chat room from a guy named Dave. He said that didn't the butt part of the Sasquatch in the film look phony, is what the one guy was asking. Like, he said he's heard that somewhere.
The butt part?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Well, I know exactly what he's talking about. Some people call it kind of looks like a diaper butt, or could be a costume of a, it looks hokey, or I don't know. That is one of the things that's very subject to the person who's looking at it, and I can understand that to a certain degree. I mean, you look at it sometimes, and there's certain aspects about it. I admit, I look at that film over and over again, and some days I look at it and I think, gosh, that's a man in a suit. And then there are other days where I'm like, there's no way, the way this thing looks, there's no way this can be a guy in a suit. I've never seen anything like this. But yeah, that aspect of the butt, does it look fake? Well, I don't know. It goes back again to what does a Bigfoot butt, what is it supposed to look like? If you've never seen a baboon before, and all of a sudden you came upon a baboon or a picture of a baboon's ass, are you going to tell me that thing looks real? That thing looks weird and goofy and plastic, and
oh yeah,
it's weird looking.
Oh, most definitely.
Is it real? Yes, of course it's real. We have them. You can go to the zoo and look at them all you want, but just if you had never seen one before and you just saw a picture of one or a movie of one, you'd think, that's really weird. That's something fake. We could say the same thing about Bigfoot in certain aspects of what we see in this thing. We don't have anything to compare it to. So therefore, if we see something that's a little different than other things we're comparing it to, it strikes us as possibly being fake.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Jeff. So, do you know anything about the sightings reported in the Bluff Creek area today?
Pardon me, one more time?
As far as with the consistency of what the creature looked like in the film and what people report today?
Well, it seems to be similar. Once again, you got something large and hairy that looks like a large hairy man, People describe some more details here and there, but usually it seems like the descriptions of the sightings we hear about nowadays are from a distance. People don't get a real a chance to process it in their brain over and over again like watching the Patterson film. So it seems to be relatively close to what we hear the Patterson film being. Usually a certain height, a certain smell, a certain weight estimated of the creature, and they all seem to be fairly consistent for the most part.
So, do you know if there's any sort of anything going on with the film lately, like any news or any TV shows or anything like that, is what someone's asking us?
I haven't heard anything lately. No, something came on my DVR that I was supposed to record. I have something I haven't seen that came out in 2010. I'm going to take a look at it. As far as the analysis of the film itself, since the stabilization, that was the last major milestone where M.K. Davis took the shake out of the equation of the film. And that was the latest and greatest thing. Now, there was a guy I know who has done an amateur recreation of the Patterson film. And I'm going to put his stuff on my website, pattersonfilm.com, coming pretty soon. He did a recreation of this. This is nobody who's a professional or has a lot of experience in doing this. And I'll let you know what I think of it. I've seen it, and what I basically came down to is this. He did a good job at making the costume. It looks fairly believable. It looks probably the most similar type of replica I've seen of the Patterson film, just in the costume form, though, just when it's sitting there and you got a picture of it still, not on anybody. Now, when he did the recreation, it didn't look anything like anything that was believable. It was not believable at all. And I'll let people on my website judge for themselves on that. Maybe some other people find it very realistic. But once you get a person in there and they start moving around in it, that's really when I think it falls apart. I think you can make a somewhat believable-looking type of still figure of the Patterson film. I think if somebody wants to recreate one, a special effects artist, somebody makes wax museum figures or statues, they could probably make one that looks pretty good. But once you put a person in it and they start moving around and you film it, that's when the rubber meets the road, and that's when people fall desperately short.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left in our show, and I was going to say, for the last 5 minutes, is there any sort of links or any sort of news or anything for your website or your book that you would like to talk about?
Well, the book's going to come out shortly, within a month and a half. I don't have, the only information I put on it is at the front of the page of my website, pattersonfilm.com. That's the artwork, that's the picture, that's the image of it. I'm not going to give away much about it. I'm not even going to have previews for it. I'm going to let that be completely absorbed when people read the book. You really have to read it in its entirety to get the full effect. And as soon as I get it out, it will be available. You guys will know first thing. I will send you off an email. Right. So you and your listeners can you can have me on if you want again, and we could talk about the book more. Or
definitely.
I've got a little bit more information to put in there, and it's going to be very good. When this is done, people are going to have a book that's completely about the Patterson film. Like I said, it's not going to be it's not going to be one of those books that you pick up and it's discussing every angle, every measurement, it's not going to be a highly technical type of Patterson film book. There's plenty of books out there that have already done that. Like I said, this one is going to go a little different. This is going to deal with theories, philosophies. This is going to deal with thinking about the Patterson film deeply. All the details. All the things that debunkers come up with, we're going to talk about those. We're going to see if they make any logical sense at all. We're going to see if it's even possible to recreate what Patterson filmed. Is it even possible? We're going to talk about all that in the book. And I'm going to even discuss how you would have to do it and go about it. So if people want to give it their own try on how to pull off a Patterson film type hoax, I'm going to let them know exactly how to attempt it. Now, whether or not it can be executed and done, that remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I personally can't wait to read it. It sounds a great study. Like I said, I'll be probably the first one buying it from you.
Yeah, probably.
I will let you guys know as soon as it's out. You first own it. It's going to be different. Most of the Bigfoot books don't deal directly with the Patterson film. There's a few that do. They're very technical, and they're very good. They're very good resources if people want to do their own research. But they're very technical. You know, you're dealing with people drawing charts, diagrams, drawing over pictures, and measurements of the creature we see, and measurements of the angle of between tracks, and that's great. But now we're going to deal with theories. That's really what we're going to deal with. We're going to deal with theories. We're going to deal with stories. We're going to deal with allegations. We're going to deal with character of the people who filmed it. We're going to talk about, does that even matter? What is the character of the people? You know, if Roger Patterson were the worst person on earth, does that mean this film is a fake? There have been a lot of allegations about who Roger Patterson really is, and I'm going to talk about those as well.
Well, I think we're approaching now the end of the show, so I guess I just want to wish you a good night, Jeff, and thank you on behalf of Bigfoots Pad, and like I said, I want to personally tell you have a good night, and I'll let everybody else say their goodbyes and thank yous as well.
Thanks again for going on our show, Jeff. We'll have to have you again when your book comes out.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. You guys have been great.
And again, everybody, if you want to find out more about Jeff Hilling or about his upcoming book, or just to read up about the Patterson footage, you can go to pattersonfilm.com. Or if there's any other links that Jeff wanted to give out, he can do that.
Well, that should be it. pattersonfilm.com. You'll be the first to know if you keep tuned to that website when it comes out. And I will send you guys out an instant email as soon as I have the books available. And I'd love to be back on your show. It's a great show. I hope you keep up with the good work. You cover a lot of interesting topics. I've looked through your repertoire, and it's good stuff. So I like your variety of topics you guys do, and I think you're doing a really good job.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks again, Jeff.
Flattering.
It actually means a lot to us.
We'll talk to you soon, guys. God bless.
You too.
Take care.
Good night.